I knew my parents were going to cancel my 25th birthday before they actually did. That might sound strange, but my sister had a pattern. Every time something important happened in my life, she somehow had an emergency, a crisis, a dramatic situation that demanded everyone's attention. Graduation, promotion, engagement party. Somehow the spotlight always found its way back to her. But this time was supposed to be different. My parents promised they would finally put me first. Then just 2 hours before my birthday dinner, my sister made one phone call. By midnight, my celebration was gone. 9 years later, a letter arrived that changed everything. And before we continue, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more powerful stories like this. And I'm always curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. I love seeing just how far these stories travel. Now let's get back to the story. My name is Rachel, and I knew my parents were going to cancel my 25th birthday before they actually did it. That probably sounds ridiculous. Most people spend the days before their birthday thinking about gifts, cake, or who might show up to celebrate. I spent mine waiting for my sister's next emergency. Growing up, I learned a simple rule in our family. Something important happened to me, somehow it became about my sister, Megan. When I graduated from college, she suddenly had a dramatic breakup. When I got promoted at work, she claimed she was having a personal crisis. When I planned a holiday trip with my parents, she somehow needed them urgently that same weekend. Every single time they dropped everything for her. And every single time I was expected to understand. Your sister needs us right now. That sentence followed me through most of my life. By the time I turned 25, I was exhausted. Still, I wanted to believe things could be different. For the first time in years, my parents had promised they would put me first. My birthday dinner had been planned for almost 3 months. I reserved a private room at my favorite restaurant. Friends were flying in from out of town. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and co-workers had confirmed attendance. Even my parents seemed genuinely excited. A week before the event, my mother hugged me and said, "This birthday is special. We're going to make it memorable." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But a small voice in the back of my mind kept warning me not to get my hopes up. The morning of my birthday started perfectly. Messages poured in. Flowers arrived at my apartment. My friends spent the afternoon helping me get ready. By 6 o'clock, guests had already started arriving at the restaurant. My parents were supposed to meet us there. At 6:15, my phone rang. It was Mom. The second I saw her name, my stomach tightened. I already knew. "Rachel," she said breathlessly. "There's been an emergency." Of course there had. What happened? "It's Megan." I closed my eyes. My friends watched me from across the room. "Is she okay?" I asked. Mom hesitated. Then she launched into a confusing story involving a disagreement, a panic-filled phone call, and a situation that supposedly couldn't wait. The details barely made sense, but none of that mattered. The result was the same. "We can't make it tonight," Mom said. A few minutes later, Dad sent a text apologizing. Just like that, they were gone. The dinner continued. Everyone tried to keep the mood positive, but the empty chairs reserved for my parents felt impossible to ignore. The worst part came 2 days later. I learned Megan's emergency wasn't actually an emergency at all. It had been exaggerated from the beginning. When I confronted my parents, they defended her anyway. That was the moment something inside me finally broke. And that night, while everyone else slept, I quietly made a decision that would change the next 9 years of my life. The morning after my birthday, I packed 2 suitcases, loaded them into my car, and left. No dramatic goodbye. No angry messages. No final confrontation. I simply disappeared from the life that had spent years teaching me I would always come second. A month earlier, I had received a job offer from a marketing firm in Denver. At the time, I wasn't sure whether to accept it. After my birthday, the decision became easy. I took the job. I rented a small apartment. And for the first time in my life, I built a future that didn't revolve around my family's approval. The first few months were difficult. There were moments when I wanted to call my parents. Moments when I wondered if I had overreacted. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered those empty chairs at my birthday dinner. I remembered hearing my mother say, "Your sister needs us," just like she always had. So I stayed away. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. My career grew steadily. I earned promotions, made friends, bought my first condo at 30. Started volunteering with a local mentorship program. Slowly, the pain that had followed me for most of my life began to fade. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply moving forward. During those years, my parents tried contacting me several times. Birthday cards, emails, holiday messages, even a few handwritten letters. First I read them. Then I stopped opening them altogether. Because every message sounded the same. We miss you. If you want to talk, please come home. Not once did they acknowledge what had actually happened. Not once did they admit how deeply they had hurt me. As far as I was concerned, nothing had changed. Then 9 years later, everything did. I was 34 when a certified letter arrived at my office. I almost ignored it. The return address was from my hometown. Something I hadn't seen in years. Curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a short note from a family attorney. My father had recently experienced a serious health setback. He wanted to see me as soon as possible. I stared at the letter for a long time. 9 years. 9 years without hearing his voice. 9 years without seeing my parents. Part of me wanted to throw the letter away. Another part couldn't stop thinking about it. What if this was my last chance? What if I said no and regretted it forever? For 3 days I carried the letter around like it weighed 100 pounds. I barely slept. Old memories kept surfacing. Some painful. Some surprisingly good. Eventually I booked a flight. The entire trip felt unreal. When the plane landed, my stomach was in knots. The town looked smaller than I remembered. The streets felt familiar and strange at the same time. An hour later I stood outside my parents' house. The same house where I had spent most of my childhood. The same house I had walked away from 9 years earlier. I took a deep breath and knocked. Mom opened the door. The second she saw me, tears filled her eyes. But before I could say a word, I noticed something strange. Something that immediately raised questions. Megan wasn't there. Not in the house. Not in the family photos. Not even mentioned. And when I finally asked where my sister was, the silence that followed told me there was a story nobody wanted to explain. The silence after my question felt endless. Where's Megan? I asked again. My mother looked down at the floor. My father slowly motioned toward the living room. Come sit with us, he said quietly. I followed them inside. The house looked almost identical to how I remembered it, but something felt different. Quieter. Heavier. Like years of unspoken regret were hanging in the air. We sat down and for a few moments nobody spoke. Then my father took a deep breath. We owe you an apology. I wasn't expecting that. Not after 9 years. Not after a lifetime of excuses. My mother wiped her eyes. We failed you, Rachel. The words hit harder than I expected. For years I had imagined this conversation. But now that it was actually happening, I didn't know how to react. Dad leaned forward. After you left, we told ourselves you'd come back eventually. I stayed silent. Then months passed. Then years. And little by little we started realizing why you left. My mother nodded. We always thought we were helping Megan. But we weren't, Dad said. We were enabling her. For the next hour, pieces of the story came together. After I left, Megan's behavior hadn't changed. If anything, it got worse. Every disagreement became a crisis. Every inconvenience became an emergency. Every situation somehow demanded everyone's attention. And for years my parents kept responding exactly as they always had. Until eventually the consequences caught up. Friends grew distant. Extended family stopped taking her calls seriously. Relationships became strained. And each time something went wrong, Megan blamed someone else. My parents finally began seeing the pattern I had recognized years earlier. The hardest part came when my father looked directly at me. Your birth